So hello everybody, this is Bhante, Joe here, and I'm just here outside the Bandakyaya solitary kuti, which is near, relatively close to Ambilapitiya, and thought to record a short Dhamma discussion for the internet. So I thought that could start with just a little meditation. So you can lean forward a bit and arch the spine, and look about 3 feet in front, and close our eyes. And can spread thoughts of goodwill to our right hand side, wishing may all beings to my right be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can make the mind infinite, can make it unbounded, all the way to the ends of the universe and beyond. In every dimension, may all beings to my right be happy and at ease. And we can spread thoughts of goodwill to our right hand side and our left hand side, wishing may all beings to my right and my left be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can spread thoughts of goodwill to our right hand side, our left hand side, and in front, wishing may all beings to my right, my left, and in front be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can spread thoughts of goodwill to our right hand side, our left hand side, in front and behind, in all 4 directions. May all beings in all 4 directions be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can spread thoughts of goodwill to our right hand side, our left hand side, in front, behind, and above. May all beings in all 4 directions and above be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can spread thoughts of goodwill to our right hand side, our left hand side, in front, behind, above, below, all around in every direction everywhere. May all beings all around in every direction everywhere be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can make the mind infinite, can make it unbounded, all the way to the ends of the universe and beyond, in every dimension. May all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. And before we finish meditating, can contemplate impermanence, how everything that's subject to arising is subject to ceasing. It's not me, it's not mine, it's not myself. It's suffering. And can open our eyes and do a short Dhamma discussion for the internet. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. So hope that this video finds you well wherever you might be. And I've come down here to the Bandokyaya solitary kuti. And this is a kuti outside the village of Panamura. It's about 7 kilometers outside the village of Panamura. And I'd heard about it when I was at a forest monastery a bit further north, I think northeast from here. So came down here, and this kuti is, it's actually a kind of independent kuti, it seems. It's not owned by any monastery or temple, it's just here. The villagers take care of it, and monks can come and stay. And so was asked a question via the internet the other day. I had done about a week ago, had done a talk about relinquishing attachments and basically going on charika, going on walking tour, and having few possessions. And a gentleman asked, he said, just paraphrasing here, as a layperson, how can one achieve that level of relinquishment, still taking care of one, while still being responsible and caring for family? Is it just a lesser degree of freedom that needs to be accepted? And so, of course, as a layperson, one can't really just become homeless like a monk. A monk traditionally is said to have gone from the home life to homelessness. And traditionally, monks were wanderers. They would wander from place to place. And so to do this, one basically can't have responsibilities to do that life fully. One basically can't have responsibilities to raise children or support a family or pay a mortgage, these kinds of things. It's obviously can't, the two can't really interact or coexist with each other. You can't pay the mortgage and be wandering, wandering freely and devoting one's time to the Dhamma full time. So for lay people, the Buddha has laid down practices, though, that can help to give a degree of freedom, although not the same degree. And these practices are basically similar to monks having few possessions and basically having the freedom to go wherever they want and kind of not having to be burdened down by many possessions. For lay people, the Buddha recommends basically having this kind of restraint in one's financial life. So here's one of the interesting things that one wouldn't think that the Buddha would, or was maybe not so widely known that the Buddha talked about finances, lay people's finances. But actually, it's hidden behind the way that people use their money. Hidden behind that is this kind of craving and attachment. It's kind of craving and attachment that causes people to be burdened down by having many possessions, by having things that bind them and take them away from freedom. So For example, one of the main ones is basically to have freedom from debt. It's kind of not to have debt to anybody anywhere. So a monk can pick up his belongings, ideally, and go out and wander and go to wherever place he finds suiting and devote his time to meditation. But for a layperson, this is difficult. But for a layperson who's in debt, so long as they're in debt, this kind of specter of debt looms over them wherever they are. It's very difficult to find mental freedom from that kind of specter of debt. And to pay off that debt, if one is in debt, one basically cannot move around. One doesn't have the freedom to move wherever one likes. One doesn't have the freedom to change locations, to move so much, because one, some freedom, but one has this responsibility to pay the debt, and one has to kind of work to do that. Another one is to make sure that one's income and expenditure is balanced, basically so that one earns more than one spends. If one is spending more than one earns, then that's a way that one gets into debt. If one gets into debt, then again, this same problem happens. So one wants to, in one's expenditures, make sure that one's income exceeds one's expenditures. So behind this is a kind of attitude of contentment, more or less, with the possessions that one has. Kind of one doesn't need so many new or flashy possessions. It's kind of, I was sometimes talk to the people here in Sri Lanka from Canada. And of course, Canada is a wonderful country. America is a wonderful country. But one of the things is there's actually, if one gets an iPhone one year and then the next year needs a new iPhone and the next year needs a new, iPad or whatever it might be, there's actually not that much freedom in that. There's not even that much happiness in that. It's kind of one gets this iPhone or iPad and then it already ceases to satisfy. One is no longer satisfied with it after just a year, 6 months, or whatever it might be. So one wants to train one's mind in the opposite direction, basically, that sometimes one needs these kind of newer electronic goods. One might need to use them, or they may be important or useful in one's job, or for various reasons. Technology evolves and people use it for different reasons. But one wants to basically set an appropriate limit on the possessions one has. So if one has a phone and it's already doing its job, it's working fine, and kind of taking videos fine, it's doing all these things fine, then there's no need to be craving for the next newest updated model of the phone. And what this does is at least two things. It takes one's mind away from having to work to earn money so much to buy this new phone. So one gains a measure of freedom and worry about financial matters, worrying about being tied to a job, tied to a place. And one also gains a measure of freedom if one can do this, because oftentimes these phones and these various things, they can be a bit of a status symbol. So one gains a kind of freedom from worrying so much about the opinions of other people. So one learns to develop this kind of contentment with the possessions that one has. So one keeping one's possessions to a minimum. And kind of one doesn't need 2 phones or 3 phones. One just needs to have 1 phone. And one doesn't need 2 or 3 TVs. One just needs to have, 1 TV, or if one has kids, maybe one for one for oneself, one for one's kids, something like this. And one in the living room, and then one doesn't need to worry so much. So the thing about having many, many possessions is that when one has many possessions, it creates this kind of burden on the mind, because one, in the back of one's head, has to worry about protecting these possessions. And the more possessions one has, the more difficult it is to move. The more difficult it is to go from one place to another, because one cannot carry all these possessions along. So when one has all these possessions, it creates this too many possessions, more than one needs, kind of stacking them up. It creates this kind of cycle where one basically gets tied to the need to protect them. One gets tied to the need to have a job. Of course, if we're a layperson, one needs a job anyway, but even more, to protect these possessions and to keep up with them, one needs to have a job that gives this consistent salary that one can rely on protecting these possessions. One can rely on paying the mortgage all the time and doing all these things. Of course, not unreasonable. But what this does is it creates a mental burden in the mind, because now one is worried about keeping the job. And if people in the workplace start to politic or threaten, one gets even more worried about that. If one's boss gets angry, one gets worried about that, because one needs that job. One needs that money to protect the possessions, to keep the possessions going, to pay the mortgage, to do all these different kinds of things. So if one keeps one's possessions to a minimum, of course one still needs a house to live in and these different kinds of things, but it reduces that. It reduces this kind of fear that one has because one needs less money to sustain one's life. If one, on top of that, has freedom from debt, one basically doesn't have a huge mortgage. One kind of has to worry about paying off. Then again, one has this freedom. One can live lightly. One doesn't need that much to survive. And what this does is it removes the power that people in the immediate vicinity of wherever one's living have to cause one trouble. If one is tied down to one's possessions in one's place, wherever it might be, then the more tied down one is, the more threatened one feels when people in that vicinity, wherever it is, cause problems. One doesn't feel threatened so much when, if any problems might arise, if one basically can pick up and go. The less tied down one is, the more freedom one feels in that sense. So of course, again, as a layperson, one can't achieve that totally. You can't just, pick up and leave your job if one has kids or or whatever it might be. But these things, making sure that one's income exceeds one's expenditures, that one doesn't go into debt, and try to make sure that one's possessions are basically at a minimum, basically what one needs, not that one becomes addicted to having new possessions or that one's family becomes addicted to having new possessions. Because what this can do is it gives one a mental freedom. It gives one a mental freedom from the worry that comes when one needs to keep things that are inherently unstable. One needs to keep maybe a high-paying job, to keep up with a high mortgage, or to keep up with more material lifestyle. Or it helps to alleviate the worries that one might have if there's problems in the neighborhood or problems here or there, because one doesn't rely so much. One's not so tied down to that location by a job, by possessions, by debt, by any of these things. All of this can help to give one a mental freedom. And the mind can become lighter. The less possessions one has, the less one is possessed by one's possessions. And when the mind becomes lighter, this is, of course, a support to one's meditation. The more one can rely on one's meditation, the more one can rely on the Dhamma, then the less the changing or the fluctuations in these external things, like one's family, one's house, one's career, one's income, the less these can have an effect on the mind. So for this reason, the Buddha lays down these guidelines. These are some of the guidelines, and he actually has more for people who are working and for people in the family life. But these are some of the guidelines relating to a monk's freedom by having a few possessions. These are some of the guidelines that parallel that in the lay life. So keeping one's possessions to a minimum as a monk or as a lay person, one gains more mental freedom. One gains more mental space. In this mental space, one can devote more towards the Dhamma, more towards something stable, so that one doesn't have to worry so much as things fluctuate. And one can hopefully move towards finding the goal that the Buddha taught about, this goal where one doesn't have to rely on anything at all. Okay, so I think leave that for reflection, and hope that everybody has a great day wherever it might be, and wishing all the blessings of Dhamma practice.